What's up, everyone? Welcome in. Another nice new edition of Celtics Beat, and all is well in the C's world. 4 straight wins. It's now 15 of 17, 17 of 20. If you want something a little cleaner, you could even go deeper, call it 22 of 28. The message here, folks, is the Celtics are winning far more than they are losing, and we are enjoying it. I'm Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti back with us, and I don't know, part-time writer, full-time photographer. It's tough to tell when I'm looking at Instagram, but I know the man is very busy in both fields. Jared Weiss from The Athletic. How are you, bud?
It's always good to be here just to talk about my photography career.
There you go. It's blossoming. It's blooming. You're doing well. Very artistic, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people who uses my IG to like put crappy iPhone photos of Jayson Tatum at the podium and stuff like that. Like I do it for my fun.
There you go.
What's the pic? There's a pic of you like with a neon sign over you with like a king chair. That was maybe my favorite pic of you in the history of pictures, Jared. It was incredible. I'm not quite sure where that is, but it's awesome.
Let's just say I can't disclose the location.
Underground nightclub.
It's a speakeasy somewhere. We're fine.
I'll say that I was at my friend's bachelor party and I had to Photoshop out the thing on the wall that said where we are. But it was a good photo, so I had to.
It's a great photo. As I said, hang out in the Louvre. We're good.
It's the kind of place that you can only get into when you got to knock on the door, or somebody opens the little eye slit and asks for a password, but the password isn't a word; it's just a combination of sounds that you got to knock on the door too. It's really next level stuff.
Weiss went to Beer Fest is basically what happened.
Yeah, that's what it is. You went to Germany and you took part in Beer Fest.
Exactly. I actually did go to Germany. I went to one of those Beer Fest things years ago. It was pretty fun.
I would not have stood. If it's anything like watching the movie, which it probably isn't, I would not have held up well.
Wait, you're telling me Beer Fest isn't accurate? Is that what you're telling me?
I think that's where I'm going with this. I think it's a tad embellished, probably by the Broken Lizard crew.
We've all been there where we're drowning at the bottom of a 15-foot tall vat of beer, and you just try to drink your way out. That happens to all of us.
Who doesn't want to try Das Boot though? You just got to know when to turn it.
We've all been to college.
Weiss is definitely the anchor guy in the Das Boot challenge, no question.
No, I cannot chug beer. I was horrible at that. I always lost at a flip cup every time.
Okay, well now we know. Next time we get together and
Weiss flip cup, we're fine.
And COVID's not a thing. We no sharing cups, obviously, and we can't be on the same team, unfortunately. That's okay.
Are we not past cup sharing? Like I haven't seen anybody wearing a mask in a while at this point. I feel like.
True.
As soon as pandemic's over, I'm immediately sharing cups with everybody.
I can't wait to take drinks out of other people's cups. Complete strangers, bring them over. What are you having? You know what? I don't care. Let me just a quick sip.
Yeah, whatever. Whatever's in that cup, it sounds just like college.
All right,
we can talk hoops now.
Yeah. There's a lot Celtics related and a bit beyond to get into here. And again, just the overview. I told you about all the winning the team has been doing. They're 5th place in the East, but just 2 games out of 2nd behind the Bucks. They're 4 out of 1st and the Miami Heat right now. Again, things are going well, and they're taking this 4-game win streak into back to the Garden Friday night, coming out of Charlotte, facing Detroit, a Pistons team that's given them an odd amount of trouble this year, but they have beaten them in 2 out of 3. So we'll see how this next one goes. You got the Mavs after that, and Luka, and it's been great. It's been great. But I to go full Grandy here for a second, that was the most recent one against the Hornets, was the 12th straight win for Boston against a team either in the playoff or play-in tournament picture. So and I know Charlotte's sub 500, but we can even put aside that whole narrative. Boston doesn't beat good teams, and they're beating good teams. They're beating good players. They're doing what they should be doing. It's not just winning games by 30 points against crap teams that have no hope of sniffing even the play-in tournament. They are beating the teams they need to beat and beyond. They're beating the teams that even people don't expect them to beat, like the Nets when they have a healthy Kevin Durant and a Kyrie Irving and all of that. But if there's one thing here, and Jared, you've been on a number of times. Evan, you're on every single week with me, and even if you're not on, you're producing. You hear every single show. So please do, either of you, but Evan in particular, disagree if I am inaccurate about this. If there's one thing that I am proud of as it relates to this show, I hope listeners would agree, is that we really don't ride the wave here. We don't call a guy, call for a guy to be fired if more patience is required. We don't demand an all-star or all-star caliber player be traded just because they're redundant, they don't like each other and they can't coexist. No, you try and figure out a way. You don't say a guy needs to be benched if that's not ultimately the solution. I think that we're very measured. We don't say a team is a contender if it's not actually a contender. I think we're pretty realistic with what this team is. And so we also don't say that a guy is most valuable player of the league when he's not even close to most valuable player of the league. He's averaging 42 points the last 4 games. He's got however many, 30 plus games in a row. He's been incredible. He is just turned 24. He's entering his prime. He's not even there yet. I do believe, guys, I really do believe Jayson Tatum at some point in his career, which is just barely off the ground, he will be a most valuable player, or he will be realistically in the most valuable player conversation. And maybe, Jared, you're the writer here. Maybe this is semantics on my part. When we look at a guy and say he's in the MVP conversation, to me, that means he needs to actually have a shot at winning the award. Not a la Isaiah Thomas, back in 2017, finish 5th and get a couple of votes, but not even sniff the award at the end of the season. Am I wrong here?
Yeah, I don't really give a crap about these semantic things, but at the end of the day, he's not in contention for the number 1 spot. He's more in contention for the 5th spot. And really, he would have to average 35 a night here on out, and they would have to somehow catch Miami and get the number 1 seed for him to even sniff that top 5. It's just too late for him to get to number 1. I mean, maybe if he averaged 40 a game over the next 18 that are left, and he got pretty much right up to the scoring title, maybe that's how he would get there. But Giannis is, I think, going to win the scoring title. He's right up there, and he's playing still great defense. And the team is a little bit better than Boston right now. And we obviously think they're probably going to be a lot better in the playoffs, but he's already up there. And Embiid has been doing what Tatum's doing right now. He's been doing it for a longer period of time. The team has been winning a little bit more. And Tatum's a really, really good wing defender, but Embiid is an even better defender at a more central position. So I think he's on a pretty clear other tier. And then Jokic is having one of those classic incomprehensible performance on a team that's crumbling around him and still keeping them completely afloat. So that's why a lot of people have him as a favorite. You just can't really compete with those things. And then DeRozan has been doing what Tatum is doing for most of the season, and the insane clutchness stuff and all that. The team is dramatically overachieving. So it's really competing. I must have forgotten somebody at this point, but he's competing with guys like Luka and Ja, who's been super hot lately for that 5th spot, I think, at this point. And again, he would have to just keep doing what he's been doing for the past 2 weeks for the rest of the year, and the Celtics would have to continue to move up those standings if he was actually going to crack that top 5, which is fine because the team was a mess earlier in the year. He was shooting really poorly most of the season. He's grown tremendously throughout the season. He's gone from being as oh wow, he's actually starting to put the playmaking together at the beginning of the year to now he's actually a really good playmaker and is completely controlling games right now. So he's made all the progress, and next year, maybe that's the year where he starts to actually crack the top 5 of the MVP conversation, which would make sense because he just turned 24, right?
Right.
Yeah, or 19 again.
Or 19 for
19, whatever.
6th time or whatever it is.
24 is probably the age where the really nascent prodigies start to crack the MVP. I think he's on track right now to be an MVP contender.
Which, by the way, Evan, is okay.
Yeah.
Why do we need to validate Jayson Tatum's insane success that he has had of late? Why do we always need to, as fans in general, and Celtics fans are really guilty of this, why do we need to go to that next level where it's yeah, of course, he was an all-star, an all-star starter as a replacement for Durant. I absolutely believe that he is going to be an all-NBA guy, whichever team he falls on. He's going to be an all-NBA guy this year. Why do we need to say he's in the MVP conversation just because he might get a few third-place votes and lose in a landslide to Jokic or Embiid or Giannis or whoever it is?
Because we need to justify our craziness just as a fan. I think this is relative. This isn't just Celtics fans, right, that are prone to doing this. It's just very loud lately because of Tatum's performances lately. But I think everybody wants their best player to be front and center, ahead of the spotlight in terms of, getting recognition, positive recognition from media outlets, from other fans, from just the Twitter discourse in general. So the fact that it took this long for Tatum to ascend to this particular point in the hierarchy of the MVP candidacy, that it just, we're making up for lost time, essentially. There is no shame in having Tatum miss out on a top 5 MVP vote. There is no shame in that. Pretty sure you can win a championship with a guy that's maybe a top 5 player in the league that year. So he has been, it's a culmination of everything, as Jared said. The defensive stuff too that you're seeing recently has been really awesome. The playmaking, what makes me laugh is people that are like, "Oh, Tatum's just starting to put this together." I'm like, no, this has been happening actually pretty much the entire season. It's just happening with less hiccups now. You're seeing him get off doubles really, really quickly instead of holding it and trying to, prod exactly where he needs to go. He knows exactly where he needs to go as soon as as soon as the second guy comes up, he knows where the ball needs to go. And people are either Grant Williams having a great year or Al Horford starting to find a shot again or whatever. They've had much more success with Tatum being this new version of himself. It's been, I'd say, beginning of the part of the season, there was bumps and bruises along the way, but once the calendar hit 2020, it's like, wow, this is a really special player. And now he's scoring a couple of times in the 40s and 50s and upper 30s, and it's on national television. Everybody gets to see it. But there is no shame in this. Tatum is not going to win the MVP award. He should not even sniff this award. But he's had a great season. Now, how great is the question? Is he a first-team All-NBA guy? That's going to be tough. Real tough list to crack there. Could he make the second team? I think there's a real shot at that. And obviously, if he didn't make an All-NBA team this year, I would be stunned if he didn't make one. But, if you're one of the 10 best, one of the 15 best players in the league, which I believe Tatum is, cemented himself in that conversation, that's a really good place to be when, as Jared pointed out, you're only 24 years old. There's more growth coming. So, Tatum has taken maybe a backseat to Ja Morant in terms of young talent this year. Ja's been, utterly fun to watch. And even like the other night, they were playing the Pelicans, and Ja's having such a great year that he dribbles the ball, loses it, goes behind him like 5 feet, and then notices there's 2 seconds left in the shot clock, hoists up a 35-footer and it goes in. It's like, yeah, that's just the season Ja's having. It's electric. Tatum is right there, and anybody that claims that they want, Tatum over Ja over Tatum, it's just a personal preference. Both these guys have been tremendous. Tatum has been amazing. Is he a top 5 player? No, but he's close, and that's a really good place to be when you're trying to build a contender between 2 guys that are 24 and 25. That's awesome. So we could. I'm not going to tell people to stop because I'm just enjoying the interactions on Twitter, but he's not going to finish top 5.
Just saying, to me, again, social media, there's this need to like Jayson Tatum. He's emerged. He's a top 5 guy now. Well, maybe he's played like a top 5 guy over the last few weeks. He's not a top 5 player in the NBA, and that's okay. I believe he will be. I believe that is still a ceiling for him, but he's not there yet. I don't believe he's a superstar yet. He will be. I do believe he will be, but I'm not ready to call him that yet. But again, I suppose, I don't know what your definition is. It sort of comes down to how many people can be a superstar in your mind? Like to some people, they'll say, well, the NBA is 25 superstars. Well, no, it doesn't. It is, 25 all-stars. But like, to me, a superstar is that next level of special. Like, you've got to be a top 10 player to be a superstar. And I think, Jayson Tatum is sniffing that. Certainly he's on the verge. He's on the precipice.
I think that the turn he's made in the last couple of months, that's what a superstar looks like. He controls the game really on both ends, not as much on the defensive end because he's just not directly involved as much, but he's running the offense for an entire game and is pretty comfortable handling any package that they throw at him, and is playmaking pretty well. I really think it's that in February, we started seeing him getting doubles, and he would kind of like walk a double team into a part of the court where he'd want it and just throw an overhead pass to like Grant Williams out in the corner on the other side of the floor. That's the superstar stuff. It's the stuff when you just kind of walk into the middle of the room and just kind of start dictating everything, like you're John Wick or one of those like over the top combat movies where the guy's just like standing still, just like going like I guess it was like Neo in the Matrix. He's just like standing still, just like deflecting everybody punching him. Like that's
one
that's
Keanu movie or another is what you're saying.
It's just basically if you're like Keanu Reeves,
Yeah.
point break,
Yeah, he was.
on the ground, just shooting at the sky, screaming. Remember at the end of that Brooklyn game when they had this great defensive possession on KD, like right at the end of the game, and he somehow split the double. Rob comes up to stop him, and he just like hops to the side and pulls up right over Rob and buries a 10-footer. Like that shot, I watched that shot and I just shook my head for like a minute straight because it was it just he could see everything happening before it started to happen. Like he started hopping in that direction, just knowing Rob was coming even before Rob started moving. It's that kind of stuff where you're just, it's funny. Tatum, he said to me last night, he's mentioned this a few times, like, I don't predetermine what I'm doing out there. I'm just taking what the defense gives me, that kind of blah, blah, blah stuff. I think the irony to it is that when you hit that superstar level, you are predetermining what you're doing. So you get into that move just a split second earlier than you used to. And that allows you to get these open looks or make these open passes way more than he used to. And like, we don't really see him taking that big sidestep anymore. He doesn't use a lot of those moves because he just gets to a point where he's already in the spot anyway. And he hits the guy at the right moment that he doesn't need to jump 5 feet away from him so that he can get an open look. Like things are easier for him. And that level of ease, I think, is what makes a superstar. And so he's been there for a couple months now, probably long enough for us to expect that he's there at this point. But that happened last year. And I mean, he's clearly another evolution from last year. And last year was a point where we're like, all right, he's starting to actually show that he's knocking on that superstar door. I think now it's that moment where he's showing that he's actually opened that door and walked into it. And I mean, the sustainability question is always the thing with him. He's shown every year that he sustains it through the playoff run. It's just that the next year he'll come back and something will go wrong. But no, he's not that far into his career. So I'd imagine if he's getting there now, he's probably going to stay there.
Well, so how about this? To all the people that are just angrily sitting there typing in the YouTube live chat as they're watching the video, like if ever there were a perfect picture of semantics, it would be this right here. I'm not ready to concede he's a superstar, but I will absolutely acknowledge that he is playing like a superstar right now. So, in that sense, I'll totally agree with you. And one great, image of that or example of that we've seen certainly, during this run that he's had, but at different points of the season as well, but especially over the last, few weeks, month and a half, whatever it's been, has been what he inevitably it's going to wind up on a t-shirt, what he coined last night in talking with the media, angry Tatum. Asked about obviously what he did in the fourth quarter there and in the third quarter, and just took over in the second half of that game to turn a very close game in Charlotte against the Hornets into a blowout. And I think it was Bill Simmons tweeted out last night, is Jayson Tatum's season the best we've seen from a Celtic since, Kevin Garnett, who obviously is getting his jersey up in the rafters on Sunday, and most people agreed. And Grandy, who was on last week, weighed in and said, I would say 100% yes. And, what I was thinking about was, for a while, we were sort of, giving like Isaiah Thomas in that MVP caliber season, that top 5 finish, sort of that credit. But the one, among others, I guess, but one huge difference between that season with IT and this season, obviously with Tatum does it on both ends of the floor. Isaiah Thomas obviously was a defensive liability for all that he did in the fourth quarter. He kind of had to offensively because, they were letting up as many points as they were as well. The whole king in the fourth thing always sort of masked, how terrible he was defensively as part of that unit. Jayson Tatum is an elite defensive player, amped up by what he's done lately. I think it was 16 or 18 against the Hornets, and great games against the Nets, against the Grizzlies, you name it. He's been incredible. It's that next level of progression that, sort of what you were alluding to before, Jared, when you say like he can just walk into the room, walk into the middle and start dictating. He is now taking over at a level, especially a consistent level, that we've never seen from him before.
Yeah, it's funny. The IT question's interesting because sure, you could give him the tiebreaker on defense, and obviously defense is what defines this team, so it makes a lot of sense there. But what IT did that year, just the number of insane clutch performances that he had in the fourth quarter, especially in that January run, it's hard to put anything over that at this point. That was just so special, and it had this emotion to it that this run doesn't quite have.
Sure.
And I mean, part of that is that everything with IT is so unbelievable that it does create that environment that Tatum doesn't quite create. Just because, like, how could he? He's a physical marvel. So
Well, I mean, he's a would-be top pick in the draft. In Ainge's eyes, was number one, basically. And then IT was that, consistently underdog, unsung, last pick in the draft, all that stuff that, yeah, I mean, from a story standpoint, you could
It
never
was a
top.
fairy tale.
Yeah.
It was the absolute basketball fairy tale of my lifetime. I'm sure there's a few other good candidates, but like that, I just don't think
Insanity.
you can ever. So like Tate, yes, that's a good one. No, but that was on another level because Isaiah ended up being a MVP caliber player that night or
Yeah.
that year. So he sustained that whole thing,
Mhm.
and he propelled that team. They were a drastic overachieving team. So I don't think you can beat it as far as what's the most important, memorable season in like the last whatever decade or so. But Tatum, yeah, I guess his overall impact you could probably say on offense is almost at that level, not quite, but like almost at that level, and has been. But like, and then on the defensive end is bigger. So yeah, you could probably give him the edge as far as raw performance. But like when we talk about this stuff, who cares about the raw performance stuff? It's like, how do you remember it? And like, I remember that IT season being the most fun season that I've covered.
Can we clean
Yeah,
this
it
up
was
before we go to
incredible.
like some whatever break that you have planned, Goffman? The point being, we all agree Tatum's not a superstar yet. He's knocking on the door. Would a deep playoff run against what is a gauntlet of an Eastern Conference, like getting to the Eastern Conference Finals or getting to the NBA Finals, or if you want to go all the way here, win an NBA title, like what level do we say, or is it not even possible that Tatum has entered the superstar level? Like if he got to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Sixers or against the Bucks and lost in 6 or 7 games to the eventual NBA champion or something like that. Would that qualify Tatum in that superstar range, or do we need to see it carry over into the next season with this new domination? That's I guess, is it possible that we finish 2022 this season 21-22 and say, "Yep, Tatum's for sure a superstar"? Or do we need to wait even longer? Either.
No, not. I mean, if he does this in the playoffs, or if he's averaging like 30 and 5 in the playoffs, and they don't completely fall on their face, then yeah, he's obviously a superstar. I mean, he's going to be. I'd be surprised if there's no way he's going to make first team All NBA. Like even if KD doesn't play enough games, like I think there's just too many guys that would probably get it. Although Jimmy Butler didn't play that many games either, so hey, maybe he somehow
That's
sneaks
true.
his way in. But like second team is certainly possible. I feel like third team is probably that's a lock. He's an All NBA player. Like that's not a problem. So yeah, at that point, for an All NBA player consistently you've clearly made another leap. You're on a team that's good. That's a legit playoff team and is making noise in the playoffs. And especially considering, I mean, he started the All Star game as an injury replacement, but he started the All Star game. His son is honestly a huge part of his superstar identity. He
Sure.
checks off every box of a superstar player at that point. I don't think it's that hard of a decision to make. I'll pretend it is for the sake of the argument, but it's not. He's like he clearly would be a superstar at that point.
All right, so we've done a lot about Jayson Tatum, and we were joking about this even before the show started, Jared. It's kind of like the of the year sort of show because let's just call it player of the year in terms of most valuable player with Jayson Tatum, and now everybody. It's everywhere, man. Like after a big win, it's Ime Udoka belongs in the coach of the year conversation. Have two guys that should be defensive player of the year, Robert Williams and Marcus Smart. I think let's start with that one because that, and I know we agree on this, is certainly the most realistic avenue for Boston to get an end of season award. Who does get your vote though between these two? Because they've both been incredibly impactful in different ways, obviously, between Big Bob there, who's just dunking like you read about, and Smart, who's taking all the credit for all the turnaround success.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it to Smart. One, just because. I mean, I guess the body of work shouldn't matter. It's an award for an individual season, but I guess there's a bit of a Smart has been kind of building up the defensive identity, helping the rest of his teammates grow defensively over the years. So maybe you give a little bit of that. But I think at the end of the day, it's that Smart is the coordinator out there, and defense is so much about communication and making reads. And so whatever his role is in the scheme and how a center tends to have an outsized role because they're the ones getting the actual stop. Smart's the guy running the ship, and Rob has a huge role in it. And Rob has taken them to the next level, I would say. But I remember sitting courtside. It was the first time I got to sit courtside at an NBA game because we were in Orlando at the beginning of the year, and that's where their media seats are still one of the few places that does that. And you can tell when you're watching, but you can't really hear it. Smart is talking nonstop the entire time. And what was really interesting is I was sitting right next to the Celtics bench, he would come over in between during dead balls, and he would be discussing coverages and different things like that with Udoka at any moment that he could get. He is just such an active extension of the coaching staff out there every single game. He is just so intimately and persistently involved with every little nook and cranny of this defense, and so that's why I think it's pretty easy for me to give him the nod there. And he is it's a legit. They have a legitimate chance at winning it because Draymond Green definitely does not have the games played. I think he probably would have clearly won it if it weren't for that. So, and Giannis's defense hasn't quite been at the same level this year. Joel Embiid hasn't quite been at the same level this year. Like there's legitimate open competition to get this spot.
I do want to acknowledge Marcus's tweet from I guess 2 days ago.
Good. That was good.
Yeah, it was good. Since somewhere the fine print in winning this is Rule 47.1a. No NBA guards without the initials GP are allowed to win Defensive Player of the Year. I did think it was interesting that, well, one, it's whatever. He's sometimes vocal on Twitter, so I guess it's interesting in and of itself that he's already sort of prefacing the whole thing by putting this out there. But also, just the fact that, we haven't had a Defensive Player of the Year in the NBA who is a guard since Gary Payton and whatever it was, 95 or 96. It's been a long time, obviously. Is there a guard bias toward this award?
He said in his case, there is. There is a big man bias, and then there's a wing bias because the bigs are the ones everything usually funnels to, and then the wings are the ones that are kind of taking on all the other scores. So, yeah, like I remember when I did that piece, Smart was making the point that point of attack defense, you're the one kind of setting the tone rather than getting to finish the play, and so it's unheralded, but it's extremely important. I totally agree with that. Like I didn't write the story thinking like it was bullshit. Like it's a very legit argument. It's just really hard to argue that the person that's kind of like setting the tone for the play is making a greater impact than the person who's actually finishing off the play, even though you could argue that one doesn't really work without the other. So I don't really know. I've thought a lot about it. A lot of people have thought a lot about it. I don't really know how to navigate the bias of process first result in that case. But it's like I think what's interesting is that you look at the people that he's really fighting for the award with, because like Bam hasn't played enough and Draymond hasn't played enough and Rudy's also missed a bunch of games. Not a ton though. It's like you got Giannis, who's still a legit candidate there. Mikal Bridges with Phoenix has been unbelievable. He's probably the best wing defender in the league as far as like typical style wing defender. And then Triple J in Memphis. Memphis has a ton of narrative going for it with the improvement that it's made. He's been phenomenal. So you have those guys, and then obviously Evan Mobley has been like pretty amazing in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Jared Allen, I don't know if he's going to have games played at this point. We'll see. But he's been really good too. And then I guess DeJounte Murray probably could get into that conversation, but I just can't imagine somebody from San Antonio with how their team has been this year winning it. So it's like, yeah, Smart's the guard in this conversation, it seems like, this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's hard. I'm with you. It's always a big man award, so obviously Rob might have like more juice, so to speak. The fact that Smart guards up frequently, and I don't think that gets played into account enough. How he look, this team switches everything, and the way they switch is really, really fun to watch. But like Ime and everybody else is very comfortable if Smart's on Kevin Durant. It's like, well, yeah, we're fine. We're not going to scram and try and switch him out of this. He's going to hold up. I'll never forget, and I know this is years ago, the Atlanta playoff game where Paul Millsap was going absolutely berserk, and Brad's like, all right, Marcus, go over there and figure this out. And Smart goes on Paul Millsap, and Paul Millsap like doesn't score the rest of the game. So it's the ability to do stuff like that at that size you just don't see. It's really, you talk about Mikal Bridges. The guy is breathtakingly good at defense, and the fact that he can guard up and guard down is amazing. But him guarding up is a little easier to understand because he's a little bit taller. For Smart to be able to do what he does at his size, I think is truly like one of one type stuff. Like you just don't see many people like that in the NBA at all. And Boston might have a few of them with I'm not saying Derek White it can do what Marcus does, but they also have another good guy that's really good defensively who's been really good all year long. And Derek White, they have so many guys. It's kind of hard to pick the front runner, so to speak. And again, Rob gets a lot of the attention because of the loud blocks that he has. But I'm with you. Like, and the point about being courtside and listening to Smart call everything out and basically be the quarterback of the entire defense and setting everything, like, is something that people are definitely not going to take into account when you factor in his case. Like, because not everybody's sitting courtside. Everybody has the ability to listen to what these guys say while they're on the floor. We're listening to Mike Gorman call the game. We're listening to, Stan Van Gundy talk about how much he loves his defense. We're not listening to Marcus Smart talk. And that's what I think gets lost in translation here a lot of times about Smart's importance on the defensive end, is that he is literally their glue guy. As much as you want to point out, Tatum's emergence on that end, or, Brown's steadiness, or Rob's just uniqueness. Like, Smart is still the guy that stirs the drink, and he's just, I mean, it's refreshing to see, because last year, Jared, this is not the guy that we saw. He was either banged up or, like, I'm not quite sure what happened last year. Maybe you have a little more insight to that, but, like, this is a much better Marcus Smart defensive performance from game one to game whatever we're on right now, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he was completely healthy last year, and I just think this team, like, I remember last year later in the season noticing how he was making a bunch of errors, and I was going back to, like, watch them, and a lot of it was that Evan Fournier would blow a switch, and he's like, crap, what do we do? Or, like, trying to communicate, and then he's trying to figure out, like, how do I fix this? So a lot of it was that the defense wasn't holding up, and he looked bad because he was the one trying to clean up a lot of the mistakes.
Or he's out there with Kemba.
There's not really anybody you could target when they have their main lineups out there, especially, and Grant is defending well too. So I think that's one of the main things with this team, is that it's not like with a team like Utah or with Milwaukee where you can clearly point to one guy. Like Milwaukee is Drew Holiday, or like Philly. It's like you can't clearly point to one guy who's doing it all for this team, cleaning everything up. They're a great defense because they're a great team defense. Well, maybe that's what makes the difference between their, like, over the top absurd defensive numbers in the last couple months and everybody else is just a really good defense.
So a couple people had asked in Twitter form to discuss defensive player of the year. We did that. So City of Champs here said, I have some thoughts. This team is fun to watch, awesome to watch again. I agree with Mannix. Now, I caught some of what Mannix said on NBC, not all of it, so maybe he said something that I didn't hear. One thing that I did hear Mannix say, I don't think he was calling for Ime to be coach of the year, but he definitely said Ime deserves, especially if they get to like a top 3 seed ultimately by the end of the regular season, that he deserves strong consideration for the award based on where they started, first year head coach, where they got to, overcoming injuries, COVID. Like, they weren't, like the Suns expected to be in the conversation from the very beginning. This was a team that, had what seemed to be an obvious ceiling, then exceeding expectations, and yada, 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 making the case for Ime to really be in that conversation. Still don't think he will be, unless this team goes out and wins like 55 games, which I don't even know if that's mathematically possible at this point. But, I just think it sort of goes back to the tone of this whole show, right? We're reaching a little bit. We're pretty excited about this, but I think when we start to get into, and I love the job that Brad has done this year. We talk about it all the time on this show. You can't find a bad move from Brad so far in my mind. At worst, you can find an even move that helped both teams, but I don't think you can find a bad move yet from Brad Stevens as in his Pobo role. But to be anointing these two guys in their first years on the job, I'm just not going there, Jared.
I think Ime not getting coach of the year is just more about Monty Williams being such an overwhelming, obvious choice.
Yeah,
and then
Taylor Jenkins
has been great about this. And yeah, actually, Spoelstra's a pretty great one that probably should get consideration, considering he never has any of his guys in there.
Ridiculous.
They have the number 1 seed. And
ridiculous.
This is kind of cooled off, but like JB Bickerstaff in Cleveland, they were just so good early.
Amazing.
He's lost a little steam. But like Memphis has been the beautiful story of the season. So Taylor Jenkins gets it there. But like the Suns are going to win like 65 games. It's insane what they're doing. And it's not as shocking for people because of how good they were in the postseason, but relative to last season, it's an unbelievable accomplishment. So Monty Williams is, like, I think, a pretty obvious choice for coach of the year. You can debate between him and like Jenkins and Spoelstra, but Ime is such a compelling story as a coach of the year because what he did early on wasn't working, and he really stuck to his guns, made a few tweaks, and then they really took off. So it's a really fascinating story, but like, I mean, hey, if they keep playing 700 ball, like 700 winning percentage ball the rest of the year, and they win, like 52 games or something like that, then that's different because their schedule is pretty loaded this month. But we got to remember, while we're feeling great about this team right now because this last week or so they've beat a bunch of good teams. A ton of their wins were just coming against like contenders with nobody available, bad teams, stuff like that. So a lot of what makes them look good is that they're winning against a bad schedule. So if this continues and they're winning at an insane clip, they're losing once every 5 games and they're continuing to win after that, they don't go on losing streaks for the rest of the year, then like sure, he could get just high enough, and maybe if like Memphis or Miami slows down, he could get there, but I don't see him cracking the top 4 of this Coach of the Year race. And then as far as Brad, I mean, he sold out long term on the Horford deal because like Alperen Şengün looks like a really exciting player. That's the guy that was taken with the pick that they traded away. Şengün's a really, really interesting player who's going to be in the league for a long time. He's only 19 or 20 right now. So like they sold out, and Horford he's actually been pretty good lately. Like his defense has been really good. He's moving the ball really well, been an important part of their offense getting better. And now he's shooting, I think like 36, 37% from 3. So like now that he's shooting pretty average, he's good. Like he's been good for them. So they paid a price that you wouldn't usually pay for a guy playing at his level most of the season. But maybe if this keeps up and they actually like do some major winning, then that's when you start to think the trade really was worth it. But like Stevens made a bunch of moves where he sacrificed pretty notable assets relative to who he was getting with him and White. And so I mean, the problem with Executive of the Year is that you vote on it before the playoffs. So it's like the award is a joke. The award, it's a horrible award. It's completely meaningless because like the Celtics built this team for the playoffs. So like who cares what they do in the regular season? Like getting Al Horford, getting Derek White, those are moves for the postseason and kind of like it was kind of a future as well. So you can't judge really Stevens' job until we see how the season plays out. And then also you just have Daryl Morey making the Harden trade, and then he gets his guy in the end, and none of us thought that was possible up until like a day before the deadline. I just can't imagine him not getting Executive of the Year. Like I feel like he's probably got that locked up. I'm sure there's somebody I'm forgetting that made a bunch of moves this offseason. Arturas Carcinovas, I always forget how to say it, in Chicago. Like they were really good with all the moves he made. The DeRozan deal obviously paid off great. Lonzo and Caruso were great for him. And I hate the Executive of the Year award because it's the award is always about who made moves to get their team really good right now. It doesn't reward like people that have been building up, that they set the wheels in motion years ago and now it's finally paying fruition, which is like as a GM, you're supposed to be making moves that don't like make your team good overnight. You're supposed to be making moves in general that build up your team over time so that you have sustained success. So we kind of give the Executive of the Year award to teams that have maybe sometimes taking a shortcut to get to success, and we reward them for it. But like any executive, like in Chicago, if that team or like Philly's the best one. Like Philly, they gave up long-term assets in order to get James Harden, who like could leave. So if this team doesn't win the championship and Harden leaves, then that trade was a horrible mistake. So Morey could win Executive of the Year for it, and then it turns out that he screwed up the franchise for it. I mean, I love I love the trade. It was a great trade. He definitely should have done it. But like this award, Brad Stevens might have done an incredible job this year, and we'll see how that plays out. We'll see how it works out long term. And the moves that he made this year might have set him up to make some great moves next year to solidify this team as a top-notch contender for the next 4 years. But we're not going to know before this regular season is over.
I'm voting for Pelinka, so I said I'm voting for Pelinka.
Yeah,
good job.
But like look at what Pelinka
they're a Y League team.
Like he sold out the future so insanely hard because look at like what happened with Miami and Boston the next year after they had those bubble runs. So he got lucky. I mean, the team was really good, but they weren't amazing. They were really good, but they weren't amazing. And then the future of this team is done for.
Like, I mean, they're going to have won the title, and people are going to look back at the LeBron era in LA and call it a failure.
Just too bad because I think every GM in the league agrees if your team is a disaster for 7 years, if you get a championship out of it, who cares? Like you got the championship, that's all that matters. So
it's not the way with the Lakers, though.
Yeah, but the Pelinka did what he was supposed to do, and it worked. So at the end of the day, he did the right thing. But they've made mistakes ever since then. Right. And whether you want to blame him or LeBron for it, either way, like they've made like they're not there because they sold the farm and won a championship and they were screwed. Like they were there because the Russ trade and because they didn't get shooters.
Yeah, it's what they did after winning a title.
Yeah, exactly. So Oh, well.
Going back to Ime, because I've gotten this question a lot and does not deal with coach of the year about the way that, night to night, it looks great. They're winning games, but the rotation is so short. Guys are playing so many minutes, obviously. Are we worried come the playoffs that the wear and tear of just getting there in the regular season and climbing out of the play-in tournament and into whatever seed they wind up finishing in is going to have been too much? Is this a little bit of mismanagement in terms of, some of the roster?
Not up to this point, because they had to not suck anymore to make the playoffs. So now they've done that part. Now they've got, at this point, if they finish at the 5 seed, great. Who cares between the 5? You don't even really want the 2nd seed because you don't want to see Brooklyn in the first round anyway. So you want to be in that 6 through 3 range, ideally. I don't even know if you want the 1 seed, honestly, because you might still see Brooklyn, and who knows, Toronto could do this up too. Yeah, so you want somewhere in the 3 to 6 range, and so at this point, I mean, they have to keep winning to maintain the East. The other teams at the top of the East are playing really well, so they have to keep up. They can't fall behind, but it looks like they have enough cushion to the play-in. They should be okay, and so at this point, I really think he's got to just get Horford and Rob's minutes down. You just brought in Daniel Tice. Daniel Tice is fine, and he's not playing most of these games. And it was fine when Horford played that big one against Memphis. Good, get him out there and play him 35 minutes when you have to. But in general, keep that dude down to 20 minutes a game when you can. Keep Rob Williams down. Rob Williams every single year has had a wear and tear injury. Last year he missed the playoffs because of a wear and tear injury. It was wasn't a bone bruise in his foot. You gotta pace these dudes. Jalen and Jayson, I'm not too concerned about. Smart. You have to put him in a straitjacket if you want to keep him under 32 a night, right? So it's. I think with those guys, it's fine. It's the guys that you have legitimate concerns about their wear and tear because of stuff that's happened in the past. That's who I'm really concerned with. And Jalen's another one. Jalen picks up so many minor knocks all the time, but I feel like he's had enough times where he's had to sit out and rest that you probably don't need to start sitting him out or dramatically cutting his minutes or things like that. And there is always that push and pull of you don't want to ramp a guy down too much because you don't want him to lose his momentum. And Tatum, Brown, Smart, those guys have really good momentum right now offensively. Even Smart shooting has kind of started to come around. He's shooting pretty much right below league average as opposed to 25% over the last couple months. So you don't want to lose that momentum, but you are right. You don't want them to. You don't want to lose the momentum because they're worn down either. And I think it's the centers where they have a guy they're paying money to who we know that can play, who they can very obviously put in and still continue to most likely perform at the same level.
Yeah, and the thing here is as well, if you look at their schedule, they only have 2 more back-to-backs left. Denver, Oklahoma City is one, and it looks like here Chicago, Milwaukee at the end of the year is the other. So beginning of the year, I felt like they had a bunch of back-to-backs or a bunch of games relatively close together. If you go back to January, if you go, I'll go all the way back to the beginning of the month. They go 5, 6, 8. So there's 3 games in 4 nights, 10, 12, 14, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, 25. All that right in a row. That's a lot of games and not a lot of time. The last part of their schedule here is a little bit more fanned out. So they're going to be able to get some rest on off days. I'm not sure. The practice nowadays, I think I'm not sure if they're practicing that much anymore anyway. They'll get some rest then. And I think that's going to be big. Of course, at the end of the year, they'll have a couple of tough games. That back to back at the end is kind of brutal between Chicago and Milwaukee, depending on what Chicago team we see. Memphis is the last game of the season. But there's some opportunities for guys to get some off nights and get some rest, like Monday, March 21st against the Thunder. Look, I like watching the Thunder. Josh Giddey is fun as hell. Shea's amazing. But you might be able to set, Al Horford in that game, or might be able to really manage his minutes or really manage Rob's minutes. It's not like they have a bunch of games at the end of the season right in a row. They can space it out a little bit. I think they'll be fine. I'm not worried about having a short bench at this point. Look, you're going to ride with what got you here, and they are 8, 9 deep pending the night, but most of the time 8 deep, and they're winning a lot of games that way. But subbing a Daniel Tice here a little bit more and give Al a little bit of a rest, or maybe play Grant a little more. They'll figure out a way to just manage everything. And the only guy that I'm really concerned about this at all, Rob, obviously, because of the way he gets dinged up, but the only guy that makes me worried at all about minutes is Al. And if you can find a way to keep Al as fresh as possible, then you're gonna be fine. But the people that are concerned about minutes at the end of the year, I think are. And I get it, but at the same time, it's I think we're gonna be fine.
The tough one is they have that back-to-back in Toronto at the end of the month where they're home at Minnesota, and I think it's a 6 o'clock game on a Sunday night, so like there's a little bit of time. But going to Toronto sucks now because of the whole testing thing and customs and all that, so it's a pain in the ass. So I wouldn't be surprised if they just like flew in that morning and actually went to bed before. But I mean, I don't know how that stuff works. But so that's a tough one. And then the Milwaukee back-to-back at the very end of the season. It's probably going to be a really important game, although who knows? That's like one where they make the call like the morning of, essentially. But they do have a couple days off, and then they have the last game against Memphis. I assume no one's playing in that game anyway, so maybe they'll play guys in that one. But like you could give Horford a break. It's simple as Horford's the one guy that you want sitting out back to backs while you can, and you got Daniel Tice. Like Daniel Tice is a very similar player who knows like how to do everything. So I think that's a lot of.
I had a real big problem with, and I mean, the podcast was great. Lowe and Simmons on Lowe's podcast the other day, but they poo-pooed the Daniel Tice thing. I'm like, you guys know he's there just because he's familiar with the system. They know what he can do. He'll come off the bench to spell Al Horford. Like, this isn't really like some needle moving thing. It was just a way to preserve their big guys for the end of the season. I didn't understand.
I think it's just that like, why are they committing this much money to Tice when
he could move in the offseason?
Yeah. Maybe, but are you going to lose? Are you going to be able to move him and not have it be a negative value deal? That's tough. Yeah. So that's why, especially, it just doesn't make sense to trade for that guy and then not be playing him. I get like you don't pay $6-7 million multiple years to your backup. They have a 3-man big rotation. Yeah. He's not in it right now, so he's getting paid an insane amount for someone who's not being paid. That's not playing, and it's not like the Wancho situation where they knew they were going to be able to get off the money pretty soon. Like, he's committed long term, but at the money he's getting, he should be fine, I assume. So I think it's that everyone that I was talking to when that trade went down was saying this is for if they move Horford in the offseason. Horford's playing well. Like, Horford. Right now, you're not looking to move Horford the way that you were 4 months ago. Like you move Horford if you have the opportunity to, but you're not looking to just dump him, and so you had to have somebody to replace him.
No, it does make you wonder, I guess, from just a financial standpoint, if in fact the reported offer of them, having 2 second-round picks from the Lakers for Schroeder or whatever that was actually on the table versus taking on all the Tice money. Yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder why not just go in that direction.
So I think they would have clearly done. I have not heard that was on the table, but I don't know.
Yeah, I remember seeing it on Twitter at the time, but whatever. It doesn't matter. What's done is done. Where I want us to wrap with this for however long it takes, and we won't go too. Honestly, like, I could go hours on this topic. I almost want to go hours on this topic. We won't. But like, I if not for Jayson Tatum doing the Jayson Tatum things that he's doing, I would have started with this in this show, which is Isaiah Thomas. All right. We just had that, reunion part, whatever, with him in Charlotte, his second game there, and goes against the Seas. And what he played 11 minutes, had 5 points, went 1 for 4, I think, from the field. He was nothing special, but he really hasn't been for the most part since he left Boston, largely through no fault of his own. I'm not putting that on him, but in particular, it's listening to him the other day about, hey man, like, did you try and get back to Boston? All those, since he left, like, for anyone that doesn't know, since he was traded away in the Kyrie Irving deal in 2017, he's been with Cleveland, the Lakers, Denver, Washington, Pelicans, Lakers again, Dallas, and now Charlotte. Like, the guy's played for a third of the NBA at this point. And listening to him, it makes me sad. It makes a lot of people sad. It's a borderline sports tragedy what has happened to his career, from when he was thinking people were going to back up the Brinks truck to now half dozen years later not even, just trying to stay in the league. But the discourse, at least on social media, surrounding Isaiah Thomas at this point is so stupid, is just so dumb. Like, I get wanting the storybook ending, because I have to believe most people know he's not remotely the guy that he once was. Again, not his fault, but he's not remotely the guy that he once was. If anyone really across the NBA thought he could be a helpful player at this point in time, he'd get that opportunity. He's, he doesn't remotely fit this team. One, they don't need the point guard, but two, defensive liability and their identity is defense. It doesn't make a lick of sense. But even if earlier in the year, before they got into this groove, you could have argued, you know what, man, like this was what's all over my mentions. Like, could have thrown him a 10-day, like throw him a bone. And it sounds like, without him coming out and saying the words, you listen to his tone, you listen to what he did say, he seems, offended, pissed, that he didn't get that opportunity from Brad Stevens. Maybe he's not. I haven't spoken with him directly, but you just listen to him, obviously, and what he sounds like. He sounds like someone who feels like, it's just a continuation of a raw deal that has totally derailed his career and derailed his life. And I hate that we're even, I know I'm perpetuating it right now, but I hate that we're even still talking about what needs to happen with Isaiah Thomas, as though like he's owed something here by the Boston Celtics. You have to bring him back and make this happen. I don't like it. I feel like there's a lot of just a lot of emotion out there on social media, not a lot of logic.
Yeah, I don't really read any of that stuff because
you're missing out.
It's irrational. Yes. Sorry, people.
Great time.
I do not look at my mentions mostly because I got enough death threats over the last couple of years. I'm like, I'm gonna stop. So
I'll keep you up at night.
So I did talk to him, and I can tell you that we had a sit down. It's on the Athletic. I'll shameless plug myself at least once.
Please do.
I had a one-on-one with him. It was really good. I think the big thing that I think is incorrect about what you're saying is that he does not have that resentment, expectation, things of that like you're saying. I think he was just super hopeful and thought that they would want to bring him back because they know that he can make that impact in the locker room. And his big pitch in his press conference, his pitch to me, it wasn't as much about, like, he kept saying, like, if they don't even want to play me, okay, I think it's that they need my veteran presence. And when I saw them struggling earlier in the year, I thought, I don't know what's going on in that locker room, but I know that I can bring that veteran presence that they need. I know I can bring them that sense of accountability and understanding how to work and all that kind of stuff. And so he was disappointed because he told me when Brad got I'm going to get my shot now because Brad loves me and we have a great relationship. But Brad didn't give him that because the team didn't, like, I kept wondering, I was hearing that they were probably going to do this, and maybe Jabari Parker might have counted, but like I kept waiting for them to get that end of the bench vet guy. A lot of these teams, it doesn't happen as much anymore, and IT made that point. You don't see it as much anymore, even with the two-ways, which have to go to younger guys basically. But I thought the Celtics would get that, Udonis Haslem, 35-year-old who's been in the league forever. It's funny, IT mentioned Taj Gibson and Derrick Rose, how like everywhere Tibbs goes, he always gets Taj Gibson. He brings Derrick Rose now with him everywhere. But like Taj Gibson is that guy. Taj Gibson sits at the precipice or at the very edge of the rotation, but he's that guy. He's Tibbs' guy. And he was hoping that he could be Brad's guy. It didn't happen. And even IT said it probably is never going to happen. And I don't think I conveyed in there anywhere that there should be an expectation that IT should get a shot with the team. What I communicated in the part that I was writing was that the Celtics didn't really do that Udonis Haslem type, and IT thought that he could be that guy. And like the thing is, I don't think the Celtics were in the position to have a roster spot that was going to someone that they didn't plan to play at all. They, at least earlier on, were trying to figure out everybody 1 through 13 on the roster, could they play? And ironically, now they only play 8 guys in games, so that doesn't happen anymore. So maybe now honestly, now is the time where there is the room for IT on the roster just as a veteran leader, but their locker room doesn't seem to need anything at this point. So you don't really want to bring in that personality anymore. And IT even said, I'm going to be me at this point, and I'm, thankfully the Hornets are a team that wants me to be a loud vocal presence in the locker room.
Do you think, and I'm not saying this is the case, I just think it's a reasonable question to ask.
How dare you?
Do you think that whether last year or this year, and last year probably all the more, justification than this year because of how that team played and how it went and all the missing bodies and everything from injuries and COVID and the availability to bring a guy like him in. But is there a non-basketball reason? We can outline all the basketball reasons to not sign Isaiah Thomas even to a 10-day deal. Is there a non-basketball reason that went against him? For the view of him just trying to, like, just the possible distraction of of, trying to, I'm not saying he would even be doing this, but I don't know, fan expectation of like reclaiming what once was, and, the storybook ending, or like maybe this, we don't want this. This isn't the guy, like when he was in LA, this isn't the guy we want taking over a huddle.
They don't at this point. I think they don't need that voice. They don't need that Udonis Haslem at this point. As far as the distraction thing, like he said, he thought that was part of it. He made it sound like he was getting that feedback from people around the team that was part of it. But I mean, they just had Taco. Taco was like, people called it a sideshow, and it no, Taco was a legitimate player, and I mean, it was erratic, but he was like really beloved by everybody there. Like, I have a great relationship with him. Everybody has a great relationship with him. He was loved. But yeah, there was the sideshow aspect of like people chanting for him at games. It was a distraction. Like, there was, the public was trying to impose the rotation onto the coach, but like that happens all the time with all sorts of players. So having one guy that people really love at the end of the bench, yeah, I don't think that was going to be an issue. So I disagree with that. But maybe it's like just enough of a thing that it's like, if you could choose to go for somebody else, then choose to go for somebody else, because you can mitigate it there. But I find it hard to believe that was a significant contributing factor to him. But it was, sure, it was a factor, just like it was probably a factor with deciding whether or not to keep Taco, but they thought it was worth it for a certain point. But they didn't keep Taco this year. I'm pretty sure they could have kept Taco this year if they wanted to, and they didn't. So, there was a certain what do you call it? Scale or equilibrium, or whatever the hell it is, of like weighing on one side the benefit of what he can bring to the table versus the cost of what level of distraction a player will bring. And just the benefit wasn't in IT's favor, with Boston not really needing a just offensive pull-up scoring point guard at this point. Like, they got Peyton. They'd rather invest in Peyton and then fill out the roster with shooters that are over 6'4".
In terms of IT, the non-basketball stuff almost like doesn't matter to me. Like, the basketball reasons are enough for me to not keep IT on this team. And I love Isaiah Thomas as a guy that's 5'6", and watched a guy that's 5'8" go toe-to-toe with Rudy Gobert in certain situations and like just attack him. I have all the love in the world for Isaiah Thomas. There's no question about that. But like, man, it just doesn't work. And it sucks it had to end this way. And I don't really see a reunion maybe ever coming, and that just stinks. But the one thing that is in Isaiah's favor is everywhere he goes in Boston, he'll just get a lot of love, and that's really amazing. It really is. So, best of luck to him. I hope everything works out. But it's unfortunate that it's unfortunate he can't seem to find any like steady ground anymore. It's like just a matter of 10 days here and there, maybe like a full off season, then maybe he can get something that a little bit more permanent than 10-day deal. But it was a fun run, man. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Oh, Celtics fans will remember it forever, at least of that generation. Or, like Jared, if you were at the Garden every night, like the people that were around for that, couple of years in particular where he was an all-star. It's and
50-pointer against Miami was outrageous. I mean, it was really just so stupid. And I think he hit 1-3. I may have been against Justin Winslow, but I don't remember.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up this show. I mentioned earlier on the show, guys, I didn't know if it was even mathematically possible for the Celtics to win 55 games. I did the math. They've won 40 and they have 15 left. So let's see if they finish strong. This will be your final question, Jared. How many games of these last 15 do you think they're going to win without actually dissecting the schedule, just throwing out a number?
Look at the schedule really quick, and I will say 10.
Okay.
Good season.
50-win team?
I mean, I think there'll be some schedule losses in there, but 50 wins considering how the season started is pretty amazing.
This has been Celtics Beat. Ton of fun for Evan, for Jared. I'm Adam. We'll catch you again next week after a few more C's wins. See you later.